Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. The Caribbean to get 17 million euros in COVID-19 aid from the EU. This story takes the lead in our 1068th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 15th March 2021. Details after this break.
Did you know that your friends and family can now shop at the Food Fair from anywhere in the world, and you can receive here in Grenada? The Food Fair and GrenadaMarket.com now make it possible through secure online shopping and personalized customer service. Simply send your loved ones a list of your preferred items or let them fill an online basket, and the items will be available for pickup or delivery. Visit GrenadaMarket.com or thefoodfair.gd today for more details. The new norm. Spread the news.
Welcome back. The Commissioner for Crisis Management within the European Commission, Janice Lanarsis, says that 17 million euros in humanitarian aid is being donated to address the needs of the Caribbean's most vulnerable, which have been worsened by the pandemic. The EU continues to provide life-saving humanitarian support directly to most vulnerable populations. In Haiti, as well as in the rest of the Caribbean, recurrent natural hazards further increase vulnerabilities, while also exacerbated by the coronavirus. In this challenging time, the EU is stepping up its long-standing humanitarian assistance to those most in need, said Lanarsis in a statement on Thursday. From the amount behind donated, Haiti will receive 14 million euros to address extreme food insecurity, provide protection for migrants and victims of gang violence, and increase resilience to disasters. The EU estimates that 4.4 million people, or 40% of the Haitian population, will need humanitarian assistance in 2021. 3 million euros will go to the other islands to help with the disaster preparedness and resilience interventions in at-risk communities. Since 1994, the European Union has provided 183 million euros in humanitarian aid to the Caribbean, excluding Haiti. This funding includes 50.8 million euros for disaster risk reduction and community resilience. In other news, as the nation marks the first anniversary since its first confirmed case of COVID-19, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister told the Parliament on Friday that reopening the country's borders could depend on having at least 60% of the population vaccinated. TV6's Jewel Brown reports.
For those who have been wondering when Trinidad and Tobago's borders would be open again, when they can fly again without being unsure as to when they would be able to return, or be able to return home without having to apply for a border closure exemption, a glimmer of hope from Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley in the House of Representatives on Friday.
I trust that in Trinidad and Tobago, when we get our vaccines, there will be a high acceptability and that people will get themselves vaccinated, and we will move from a low percentage to upwards of 60%, and then we would be able to do a lot of things, including taking steps to open up our border and so on.
Dr. Rowley, the MP for Diego Martin West, made the announcement in the context of herd immunity in response to a question raised by Faizabad MP Dr. Lakram Budo. Friday marked the one-year anniversary of the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago on March 12th of last year. It is also almost a year since the government closed the borders on March 22nd of last year as part of measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. Exemptions can only be approved by the National Security Minister. In addition, restrictions such as supermarkets, groceries, shops, restaurants, and bars having to close at 10 p.m., restrictions on drinking in bars, and the closure of dance clubs remain in effect.
Are you in a position to indicate the number of vaccines that the government intends to procure outside the COVAX African Medical Supplies platform so as to create the herd immunity that is required to allow for the opening up of the economy?
Speaking, Madam Speaker, what we're looking at is getting to a level of vaccinating that in terms of actually having people vaccinated is about approximately 600,000 or 700,000, because that would mean we are in the order of between 60 and 75%, and the biology will tell us that that is where we are in the range of herd immunity.
According to the World Health Organization, herd immunity is the indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. Dr. Rowley faced a follow-up question from Oropouche East MP Dr. Rudal Munilal.
Prime Minister, as head of government of this country, do you at this time have a clue as to when this country will receive or have possession of 1.4 million doses for 700,000 persons to equate to herd immunity? Do we have a clue of when this country will have mass administration of vaccines?
Prime Minister.
I just said that we expect in short order to begin off receiving our supply from COVAX. That will be the beginning of a flow of vaccine into this country.
The Prime Minister said the government will update the public whenever it gets firm commitments arising out of its bilateral talks with Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, manufacturers of what he called approved vaccines. Dr. Rowley said Trinidad and Tobago does not make vaccines.
That situation will improve in the months ahead. We have commitments, we have discussions in place, we have contracts in place, we have payments in place, and given the world supply, Madam Speaker, to answer the question from the member Oropouche, as I speak to you now, we are looking at about mid-year, that the availability and flow by May, June, July, August, that the flow of vaccines into our country would be such that we will be very busy vaccinating the population.
The Prime Minister indicated that the objective is not just to get the COVID vaccines.
Getting it into people's arms voluntarily is another thing, because there's one country, Madam Speaker, I know of, that has a lot of vaccines, but is having great difficulty in having people vaccinated to get to this state of herd immunity.
Jewel Brown, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram says the country has done much better than even health experts predicted in COVID-19. He was at the Express House to receive the Express Individual of the Year award, and he's crediting the people for being responsible for the country's standing. Urvashitawari Rupnarayan of TV6 News reports.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram says the COVID situation in TNT is much better than health officials anticipated.
Because of our closure of our borders, early closure of the borders, we were managing to keep a lot of the cases out through that avenue. And the ones that came in, of course, we contact traced, we test very early, and we ring-fence them by way of quarantine.
Then came the second phase.
After we would have gone into election season, we would have seen a spike in cases coming about in August and September, which was the largest spike we saw for the entire period, even up to present, driven from a lot of close quarter gatherings without mask wearing.
He's crediting early legislating of mask use as a major counterattack against the spread of the deadly virus.
The mask wearing in particular seemed to have gone a long way in slowing the flow, the speed at which COVID-19 was spreading in Trinidad. And subsequent to that, we saw a considerable decrease in October and November, and then that decrease went further throughout the year, and up to now, we actually almost a 7-day rolling average of about 3 or 4 cases over the last 7 days, and even going as far back as a month, we would see that same kind of 7-8 cases a day, that kind of level. So the levels are considerably lower than we expected, to be honest, coming out of Christmas.
And while we're talking about major weapons in the fight against this submicroscopic microbe, the man leading the public health battle credits the people.
I really think it's attributed a lot to the number of people wearing the mask appropriately. And really the population has played a great role. And you see the change in the people. People know how to adapt to the new normal. They know how to wear your mask. They know how to sanitize, wash your hands when you go to a place, and they learn about the risk and how to avoid the risk. So it's a population that has been very mature.
With the main goal of keeping the numbers low, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Parasram once again returns to you, the people, to be part of the voluntary take-up of WHO-approved vaccines.
Our first goal in terms of vaccination, again, is really to protect the vulnerable. And if we get that done, then we go on to herd immunity, hopefully in the near future. All right, but what we require, of course, is once we get the vaccines, that people take it, And so that's a part of it where we can't control. It's still voluntary, but we really need people to come out in their numbers.
The first batch of vaccines through the COVAX facility, which is AstraZeneca, is due to arrive by the end of March. Urvashi Tiwari, Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
Over in St. Lucia, Grosile MP Leonard Spira Montoute has criticized a statement by the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party regarding the possible cause of recent scenes of lawlessness in St. Lucia. Joachim Duplessis of HTS News Force has more.
Parliamentary representative for Grosile, Leonard Montoute, has described the scenes in Grosile town which went viral on social media on Thursday night as disturbing. Police officers who were attempting to uphold the COVID-19 curfew were assaulted on St. George Street by a group of lawbreakers, resulting in injury to one officer and 2 civilians. Montoute is imploring citizens to follow the letter of the law. The melee in Grosile follows a strikingly similar incident in Soufrière almost a week ago, where law officers were pummeled with rocks and bottles by party-going COVID-19 violators at a bar. The opposition St. Lucia Labour Party has been heavily criticized in some circles for characterizing recent civil disobedience and lawlessness as a manifestation of frustration with the current dispensation.
Well, I think that's a very disappointing comment to come from a leader. As leaders, we should dissuade people at all costs from engaging in lawlessness, from engaging in any form of violence and unnecessary disobedience.
Through funding allocated by the Inter-American Development Bank, Guyana will soon be equipped to implement a restorative criminal justice system which will seek to reduce the incidence of crime and overcrowding in the prisons. The details in this report from HGP's Wendell Badri.
This is according to the country's Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandlal, who on Wednesday delivered the opening remarks at a workshop geared at sensitizing a select group of persons about the initiative.
It goes deeper than the occupants of the prisons. In fact, it goes back to the underlying causes that may have resulted in the person being in the prison.
The Attorney General, while stating that studies over the years have revealed that the more hardcore means of penalizing offenders, such as prison sentences, among others, have not helped in the reduction of crime. He posited that, instead, it may have resulted in an upsurge in criminal activities. The Attorney General said that this initiative, albeit a new method of dealing with criminal activities in this country, not only seeks to examine the root causes of crime, but will also see offenders being pitted against victims, with the aim of treating with the hurt, pain, and anguish caused.
Because when someone does you a physical wrong, someone commits a crime against you, you don't want to be close to that person. You have animosity for that person. You have hostility for that person. You have hate for that person. You may even have in your mind a desire for revenge.
Nandlal, while confessing that he is no expert on the issue, proclaimed that such a program would help deter potential violators from occupying prison spaces.
And restorative justice goes to those underlying factors and try to address them to prevent others in similar circumstances from ending up in the prison.
Nandlal further spoke to the plan of training for religious leaders, judicial and probation officers, among others, in the execution of this initiative. Many activists, government officials, and other leaders have expressed concern about the overcrowding in Ghana's prison system. Meanwhile, 4 escapees of the Mazaruni prison in Region 7 are still at large. That facility is considered to be one of the maximum security facilities in the country. Wendell Badri, HGP Nightly News.
Calling all vehicle owners. Inspection and licensing continues, and at Hubbard's we want you to be ready. From February 16th to March 31st, registration numbers 2501 to 5000 with single registration letter, or registration numbers 251 to 500 with plural registration letters will receive 11% off new torque tires and PowerMax batteries. Don't get caught unprepared. Visit us today at the Motor Department in Mount Gay or the Tire Bay in Grand Anse near to the building supplies.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.